Welcome back to a new episode of Future Bites. We are on stage 17 in Penn Plaza at the Cumulus Media radio stations. And today I actually have a fantastic guest, which I'm super excited to learn a lot from. So Ryan Polgar, Tech Ethicist.
That's what I am.
And to me, this is possibly one of the biggest issues. And I'll try to talk just a little bit because I want to tell you where my concern is, and then you just start like a freight train.
Okay.
So I realized that, since the advent of the web and especially social media and this hyper-connected world, you are bombarded with advertising. It is how commerce works. There's nothing wrong about it. But they started to becoming more targeted and more personal, and you identify with the things that you see. And all of a sudden, you have other devices like phones and tablets and assistants like Alexa or Google Office, and you have microphones that are listening to you. And all of a sudden, those ads, they target you in a way that is so specific that finally, one day, you realize, I'm being listened to constantly. I am exploring tech in the kitchen. That to me is more important than, I would say, even the bedroom, most of the times. Or it is the core of my house. That's where I talk about everything. Personal stuff, business stuff. I talk in private with my wife. My kids are there. But I'm starting to realize that this constant influx of smart appliances and devices that are always with me and that are always on are starting slightly to infringe on my freedom to, not necessarily to talk, but I am finally aware that I'm being listened to.
Yeah, it kind of happened recently that really kind of struck a chord with a lot of people, where a lot of individuals who had Amazon Echo in their house, they started hearing this random laughter, and something had triggered Alexa to just start randomly laughing. And I think that struck a nerve with people because they said, "Oh my God."
It's like having a mother-in-law.
Right, they're always listening. And to your point, it really gets at the heart of this idea of, where do we have a sanctuary? Right? Isn't the home, isn't the kitchen, isn't that a time where you can talk with your family and talk with your loved ones and invite friends over and have the freedom to not have surveillance on you? And I think that's the tricky part, is that,
would you call this surveillance?
A lot of all internet-connected devices really can operate both ways. They can be used for good, or they can be used for nefarious purposes. There was a big article in New York Times recently where they were talking about, unfortunately, in a lot of domestic partnerships that have gone sour, one party has been able to abuse internet-connected devices to spy on the other person. Yeah. And then they would go to the cops and say, "My God, my ex-husband is spying on me," and the cop has no idea what they're talking about, right? But these devices do act like that. And again, it doesn't have to be nefarious. When they're being created, it's not like they're saying, "We're creating an Orwellian future," right? Nobody's thinking about this, but they should think about it. And that's
but
where
even if the thought comes to mind once they design a product, I think that the power and the benefits in their mind surpasses the downfall of people complaining about privacy issues. But at the same time, you're finding, I give you an example, my accent. My Siri on my iPhone gets triggered even when I don't call her, because I have a little bit of a lisp or I speak with a different accent, and all of a sudden I have like a whole query of things that Siri's been listening to and got triggered by something different. But do you think that people, when they go buy the devices, when people decided to buy the first iteration of Alexa, now Sonos is coming out and he's going to be carrying all these devices in one single microphone, do they think about the music? Do they think about the shopping? Or do they always consider the pros and cons?
They talk about this as the privity paradox, right? The paradox of our privacy is that a lot of times in studies where people say, "Well, do you care about your privacy?" People say, "Yes, of course, I care a lot about my privacy." But then when they are given the option to download an app that is taking away their privacy, they'll freely just click on the button. Because as we know,
we agree on the terms always without reading on the terms.
But nobody reads the terms of service. They had done, a UConn researcher did a study 2 years ago where they set up a fake social media account, and they said, all right, they took these college participants, all right, read the terms of service and sign up. And 98% of participants would give away their firstborn child
because they skip
because they don't read it, because they skim it. The issue is not telling people, "Hey, you should read the terms of service," because frankly, that's That's just not going to happen. I mean, you can be 13
unless you start doing it with a lawyer present. But still,
I'm a lawyer, and I'm not going to read every terms of service. Yeah. Okay, you have 13-year-olds who are on Instagram. Are you telling me that you're expecting a 13-year-old to have an advanced degree and read 18 pages of legalese every day? I mean, that's bizarre. No. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
And that was interesting, actually, because I noticed when my kids started using their devices and Instagram was available, they were 11, 10, and they just went around it. So it's not even about the 13-year-old. It's like all of a sudden you have kids that are way too young to even understand the kind of connections that are possible through these devices. And, I don't want to necessarily bring it to the kids on the phone, but this happens everywhere. The moment that you will put a smart refrigerator in your kitchen that has a camera or a microphone.
Well, that's why I'm excited about your show, though, because you're talking thoughtfully about a lot of these issues that we need to have a deeper societal discussion about the implications of this. As you mentioned, right, you have 11-year-olds on social media, and you have parents who might be unaware of the law that usually restricts that, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is the reason why Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat say 13 plus. But then you don't have all the parties on the same page, and that's what we need to do. We need to have a more fluid conversation. We need to bring the legislative branch in this. We need to have tech industry involved. We need to have activists involved.
As a simple example, all the emails that we got in the past month about the GDPR and the new rules.
Right. Yeah.
I dare anybody to tell me what those emails were about. For the most part, the people that I know, we received so many. We clicked OK on everything. Yes, privacy rules have changed. It's okay. I don't want to renounce to my Facebook. I don't want to renounce to my apps. I'll just click yes and hope for the best.
Well, and that was the irony of it. It actually created a headache for people to say, my God, now I get another 50 emails. And you also saw from those GDPR emails that people don't understand exactly what the implications are, because all the emails were all over the map of what they were saying.
What is the definition of GDPR? I remember that. What is the GDPR?
Well, the GDPR is the law that had been kind of hammered out the last couple of years with the EU, went into effect in late May. And basically that is putting teeth into the idea that social media companies, no matter what size, they need to have a level of transparency to have informed consent. So just what we were talking about of people just clicking on buttons, GDPR is saying that is not enough. Yeah. You need to actually have informed consent. And it does affect everybody worldwide, even though it is a EU regulation, because it impacts Europeans no matter where they're living.
Right, exactly.
Right. So anybody who...
plus the world is shrinking. So it's, any company has their, and offices in Europe, it's
and then Facebook and others have said, okay, now we're going to start moving that over as the standard. And it also inspired other states. Like right now, you had California that recently passed another law, kind of similar, trying to say we need this informed consent.
And basically, the GDPR says that by default, certain platforms are not allowed to share your information unless they request your consensus.
Right.
Right. And then before it was like, okay, you subscribe to X service, like let's say Facebook again, just for the sake of an example. You are giving away your information. Like all of a sudden, your information becomes public, and we can use it and trade it. So all of a sudden, we are also becoming a commodity.
We are. We are
a research tool.
Yeah.
Every day.
Well, and that's the kicker. And they like to say, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I think what we need to have is a deeper understanding of the trade-off.
Yeah.
So basically, when you saw Mark Zuckerberg having this testimony in front of Congress, there seemed to be a failure of understanding the business model. Facebook is bigger than ExxonMobil. Right? They make billions of dollars every year based on advertising that they can target based on what they learn about each individual. Yes. So in order for them to pay expensive engineers in Silicon Valley, they monetize that based on the time that you're giving, and then with what data they can or insight they can extract from that. We need to start thinking about the time and the data that we give as a currency. Yeah. Right. So if I could say, I'm giving $10 worth of currency every month to Facebook, then I understand that. Yeah. So I think that we need to start thinking of our privacy.
We have become,
privacy as a currency.
We have become some sort of like unwilling or somewhat willing focus group for all these companies, because our interactions, our reactions with all the platforms, all the buttons, all the purchases, all our profiles on different websites can be analyzed, put together on a spreadsheet. that's our life. Like our life now can really be identified on a spreadsheet by looking at our engagement, online presence, and so on.
And I would say that the greatest irony of the digital age is that it's caused us to reflect more about what it means to be human. Right. So now we're starting to see that these social media companies are building these psychographic profiles on users. And then they're starting to say, here's who you are. Here's your next step, right, with predictive analytics. Here's what you're most likely going to purchase. But that has caused...
I read an article the other day that said that Google is developing this algorithm that is going to be able to tell you once you're in the hospital when you're going to die.
Yeah. Well, they had done...
your life expectations in seconds. I'm like, fuck, you pass me a joint at this point.
There is. And they're working on ways to say how you're even touching your smartphone is indicative of your suicidality, of your next step. It really kind of goes to a little bit of like Minority Report, if you've seen that Tom Cruise movie or the Philip K. Dick book. This idea that if in the future, which is now, if we can predict somebody's future behavior based on their past behavior, then we start indicating what their next likely step is. But the reason why that sometimes can be offensive to us as humans is because that doesn't make us feel like we have free will. Yeah. Like if all of a sudden they're saying, here's what you're going to purchase, here's the music that you like, here's your next step that you're going to do, here's when you're going to die.
There's no exploration. Everything is offered to us in a way where it makes our life easier and simpler. I find it to a degree a very American thing, meaning like time is money. And I started buying into this technology because saving time saves me money. I have sacrificed the time that you spend willingly and knowingly researching and choosing something versus something else because it's something that you reasoned about. Because maybe, let's talk about impulsive shopping. You're in the kitchen, you want to cook something or use something. Let's bring it back to the kitchen because that's our chosen environment. But so many choices are presented to you, but there's always the one on top that is always considered to be the best for you, either quality-wise, price-wise, delivery time-wise. You're always drawn to what is simpler and what is easier, what is faster. Not necessarily what is better for you or something that might just lead you to a discovery. I mean, certain times you need to try things to discover that they're not for you too. And that teaches you about yourself.
And that's the tricky part, is that if we move it more towards predictive analytics, let's say for the kitchen, if it's saying, here's what you're likely going to want for dinner, then you're going to be constantly stuck in this loop of eating the same thing, right? I was joking with somebody the other day. Well, if we were using that years ago, well, then kale would still be, a garnish. Yeah. I wouldn't be having, I wouldn't be having chia seeds in my drinks. They would be used for chia pets, right? But we've changed our cuisine based on the fact that you have innovative chefs who go out there and experiment. They're trying to be creative. Whereas if you just put it into a loop where you say, here's what this guy ate before, therefore here's what he's going to eat tomorrow, then you would never get outside of that. And that's very dangerous. And we need to start thinking that at what point do we allow the human side, that's free will, that has volition, that has creativity, to move outside of it and to challenge our norms. And it's tricky because one of the things I personally focus on is that the business side of tech is not always perfectly aligned with the human side of users and society.
Don't you think it's making us weaker intellectually?
It offers the default. Like, for example, I was taking a train to get here, and somebody was kind of messaging me on LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn constantly will give me suggestions about saying, like, don't think of what to say to this person. Just say, that sounds great. Or let's get coffee, right? That usurps my volition, but it's making the path of least resistance. So it's making it very tempting for me to just say, let me just click a button.
This is counter-evolution, though, to a degree, because it's slowing down our ability to adapt because they are adapting to us.
Yes.
The outside is adapting to the way that we are actually leveraging our weaknesses.
It certainly is.
That's
well, like
really,
everybody's trying to like hack, something, and we're trying to like, hack communication. But the issue that I have with it is that we are diluting the very beauty of communication, which is that we're trying to we're trying to be human. We're trying to form bonds. It's kind of like bringing it back to cooking. Food is not just about sustenance. It's not just about making sure, like if you're in an industrialized country like the United States, it's about like forming bonds. It's about like in Italy, it's about showing love.
Yeah.
Right. So that's something we need to think about with communication, how we interact online. Like when I'm on LinkedIn, it's not just about conveying knowledge. It shouldn't just be about clicking a button. It should be about actually forming a bond with somebody and saying, you know what? Yeah, let's grab a cup of coffee. Maybe we can collaborate on something.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just like constantly sending information.
Well, now you have, now Google showed a couple of weeks ago this the new phoners and the phone call, the assistant making a phone.
The Google Duplex.
Yeah, what was it, booking like a hair salon, I think?
They do the hair salon, and they also do a restaurant reservation.
And what I was reading about is that the real success and the real, hinging on the power of the platform is the ability of humanizing it. So any pause in speech, every let me think, this is actually what is making AI a little bit more human. Yeah. Eventually, those assistants will probably ask us, would you like me to use your voice?
Yes.
I want to go hide in the hole.
Well, this is what I worry about. One, those ums and the ahs. Google had researched that, and what they found is that when they were testing it out and they didn't put those ums and ahs, they would get a lot of hang-ups. And that when we expect humans to have those natural ums and ahs, it's called language disfluence, where you would not be perfect.
Right.
So humans aren't perfect. To err is human. Therefore, we're making our tech have errors, which is kind of like hilarious and mind-blowing at the same time. But what I would be concerned about is, to your point, we're going to have our own AI assistants that sound like us in the future. So the next logical step, and something that Google and others need to think about, is one, they can say, okay, great, this is just going to be for a haircut appointment. But no, the way it's going to be used is for advertisers. The way it's going to be used is, let's imagine right on LinkedIn right now, I'm connected with, 1,600 people. I don't know 1,600 people. Right. I can't have 1,600 friends. The average, there's something called Dunbar numbers saying the average person can handle about 150 relationships based on time and reciprocity. But the issue is, I could easily structure my AI assistant in the near future to call everybody on their birthday, which LinkedIn provides, and then automatically just start having a conversation. That person would pick up and say, wow, this David guy is so thoughtful. He'd call me on my birthday. Yeah. I hardly know the guy.
Well, I never received as many birthday wishes since I got on Facebook.
Right, exactly.
I used to be able to know he's a friend. He's thinking about me. And now it's lost in this ocean of people that I have met sometimes twice, or sometimes they're just fans and they just drop it, which is... It's nice because it's your birthday. It's like, oh, shit, I got 300 messages. But your brother's message is mixed into those.
Yes.
And they get buried. So on one side, I do believe that technology is allowing us to create a relationship and evolve as a human being in the social sphere. On the other side is castrating the ability of discerning where the real relationship is versus where either just like the simple work connection or the occasional hustle. Going back to Google making phone calls, yes, on one side I find it incredibly exciting. Hey, Google, can you book my haircut? Great. But I got kids. And this also opened the door to somebody being able to reach out to my kids. Yeah. And I don't want to necessarily say pretending to be me, but it opens the door to a multitude of issues that,
Yeah, that would be a good Black Mirror episode, is that I
haven't thought about this issue until now.
They pretend it's you. They can easily take your voice, right? You're on TV.
Get out of school and meet you at the corner.
It'd be super easy to sample your voice, and to create something that sounds like you would call your kids. It's completely feasible from a technical standpoint.
It doesn't happen anymore because I think that people are getting used to it. But in the very beginning, when my kids asked me for a smartphone, I told them, given that I'm going to be the one that pays the bill, the only thing you have to do is to keep your GPS on. Allow me to track you. That is my phone.
Yep.
And you're a minor. You're in school. As long as I know that you're there where you're supposed to be, or I have an issue, look for me. That is it's okay. Now it's getting even more complicated because my kids are growing up. They are realizing that they don't want to be necessarily entangled in this privacy thing with their parents too much. But at the same time, the outside world is offering so many other possibilities of controlling. So I do not believe in the very beginning it was about building relationships and strengthening your relationships. And now I believe that it's getting diluted incredibly.
Well, it's tricky because I think it goes to the allure of social media to cause us to have more friends and more events, which it can do. But the issue is that it also gives us the ease of it, and that's where sometimes I think people screw up. So basically, we can say, "Hey, I'm connected with so many people, therefore I have so many friends." But you want somebody to go to trivia night with, or you want somebody to go to a restaurant with. You have a deeper need, and unless you can use that as a jumping off point, a conduit to those deepened relationships, then that's where it's going to be more problematic. I know they did research a few years ago that found that the average person only has like one super close friends, and that the amount of friends or that we consider friends has gone down over the years, and something that they are concerned about, something that MIT researcher Sherry Turkle has written about.
On the other side, real friends, they don't want a Facebook message. They want a phone call.
Yes.
So, I think that this also has taken away from our real strong relationships because it's distracted us a little bit, and because it's easier to reach out. And it's like, well, I don't need to call. I saw on Facebook the pictures from yesterday. I know what they're doing. And before it was to be like, hey, what did you do yesterday? Good to talk to you.
And I think that's what we're learning, though, is that real relationships take real work, and that it's very easy for us just to have this kind of candy feeling of a relationship by saying, hey, I saw a bunch of photos, which is great. Again, that can be a jumping off point to actually saying, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's do something. Let's plan something. And Facebook has tried that with trying to push people towards making plans. But unless we actually do that, it's not going to happen. And I think that's why a lot of times people feel surrounded by a bunch of people, but they feel lonely. That's a huge, huge issue. I know with anxiety and suicide taking a large increase in recent years. That's something
we've
we're
seen the birth
about.
of all this. Like I got the first iPod, that I mentioned first. We didn't grow up with cell phones. I don't know how old you are, but I guess we're kind of like we've seen it happening. For my kids, though, to them, this is how the world functions. So, we do have the power to debate or pause a moment and think about how it was versus how it is. For them, this is like a starting point. So they take for granted and they accept with their blinded eyes anything just because that's how it is.
Well, I mean, that's where they use that Yiddish phrase, to an earthworm and horseradish, the world is horseradish, right? Somebody who's growing up, maybe who's 13 today, would they know a world where you could have that offline existence? But I do see a lot of promising, parts of this where a lot of kids are actually saying, you know what? Let me take a week without my smartphone. You're doing a lot of digital diets.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Can you talk to my daughters?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really do think it's a misnomer to think it's a complete generational issue. Even studies have shown that it's actually Gen X that uses social media the most. So even though we say, oh, those millennials or Gen Z now, it's statistically not always the case. Everybody is struggling with looking at their smartphone. You go to a restaurant. It's not just like the 18-year-old. It's a 65-year-old couple that's not talking to each other because they're watching a video on their smartphone, right? So we have realized that connection is not just going to naturally happen because two people are sitting in a restaurant. Connection is going to happen when those two people say connection is important. I'm going to leave my smartphone in my bag, and I'm going to look at my significant other, and I'm going to ask them, how are you? Right? Just simple, basic things. But it's something that I think I jokingly like to say in the future, we're going to have classes that are how to be a human, right? Where we might actually need to go back and say, what is essential to form
how do you write a grocery list?
Right.
How do you go grocery shopping?
Yeah, exactly.
The basic tasks, that we have been. I don't know.
Are we going to have to do that in the future, or with those you mentioned the voice assistants, right? Maybe they already say like, you're low on eggs. Oh, actually, it's been delivered.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I am. I always tell everybody that I'm really analog in the way that I grew up in a farm, and to me, like the world is beautiful. I think of luxury as being disconnected these days, on the ability of finding yourself in the quiet or being with friends, but not being bombarded by all this. At the same time, all this excites me so much. And I wanted to ask you, what are your concerns for the future, especially for people that, let's say, the Alexas or the Amazon that are entering our home, that are entering our kitchen, to respect our privacy or to make the user understand that there is a trade-off in generating the commerce that they want?
Yeah, I think this is where we're going to need, as let's say in America, push back a little more to have a robust legislative response. Right now, our kind of Congress has been relatively lax with having a significant role in shaping this. And I think it's important because businesses, right, and tech companies are businesses, even though originally they got framed as we're making the world a more connected place, they have shareholders. They're publicly traded companies. So they're always trying to maximize their shareholder wealth within the confines, typically, of legality. But one of the things that we haven't pushed enough is the legality part, right? If we don't like the way that people are driving, you change the rules of the road. So I think if we're really bothered by some of these privacy trade-offs, instead of just appealing to kind of the good nature of these tech leaders, which is fine, we need to actually change the laws so then they say it's going to be more advantageous from a financial standpoint if I create something that is respectful of privacy, because that is what's allowed.
But then you have the issue of Zuckerberg going to speak in front of Congress, and Congress not understanding how Facebook works.
Right.
So, that our legislative branch, government, is to a degree, I would say, quote unquote, old, where certain kind of problematics, they just don't know where to start tackling them because they don't understand them.
And there was quite a juxtaposition, because then when Zuckerberg was over in Europe, you've seen a lot more pointed kind of questions and more kind of educated questions. So I think that was a wake-up call for the American legislative branch to actually inject a greater level of thinking about some of these issues. And as you mentioned, right, it seemed like they were kind of outmatched. Granted, they have a lot of different topics that they deal with, but this is so important. And I think that is the major issue that I always want to kind of hit home on, is that we like to think of tech as it's creating some wow gadget. It's not. Tech is society. Tech is affecting how we relate to one another.
Tech was inventing the wheel. That was tech.
Right, exactly.
Tech, I think, is evolving tools for us to improve our life. Is there something these days that is bothering you? Like something of in this realm that you're like, that you cannot stand, or that is really posing, make you question the situation?
Yeah. What I'm really bothered by is whether or not our communication is going to become what I would call botified. Whether instead of us acting as humans connecting to other people, we are gamifying our relationships. So, for example, when LinkedIn, going back to LinkedIn,
feeds you the possible answer.
Right, or not even just that. They sent me something. I'm sure you get the same message where it said, hey, click this button, David, and you will automatically send invitations to 822 people. Think about that for a minute. That is nonsensical, because it makes sense from LinkedIn's financial standpoint, because then I'm connected with more people, which gives more data, which can be monetized, and they make more money. But from my standpoint, I am sending invitations to 822 people. I don't know 822 new people, but now go back to those people receiving the invitations. They receive a message that says, David wants you to join his network. So they think, and how relationships work, they think that I
willingly
exercise
and research and everything.
They think that I had volition and that I thought about them. So their reaction is going to be, he thought about me, therefore I'm going to think about him. This is what I'm actually concerned about, and not a lot of people are talking about, is that we are making a lopsided relationship because tech companies are not aligned with understanding the value of relationships.
Do you see this driven by the need of emotional connection or work or hustle, since we're in New York?
Yeah, A little bit. It's also the fact that we have metrics that are constantly in our face. So, for example, I remember one time, I was on a train last year, and this guy that I knew a little bit, he just joined Twitter, right? So he was new to Twitter, and he was, I'm really excited about it. And I said, you know what I can't stand about Twitter? And I told him, I said, I can't stand all the people that will just follow 1,000 accounts and then get 600 people to follow them back, and then they'll unfollow those, 500 of those people. So then it gives them the impression that they are a popular person. And instead of him being mortified, like I was, he said, that's a great idea. So he spent the entire train ride just linking up with people to then have them follow him back and then to unfollow them. And that's what I'm concerned with. And that's what we haven't solved, is that the very idea of putting metrics in our face drives us bananas. It really does. Yeah. So, for example, a lot of times I talk to teenagers, and one of the things I say to them is, how would you act differently if there wasn't a button that would say how many times something has been liked or something has been shared? Mm-hmm. And so, my God, is that possible? And they've done studies on this, and people would act dramatically different because we are not posting what we like. We are posting what will be liked. If somebody was into poetry, but that's not
to be liked,
right. You're expecting to be liked, but you're also you're making it so transparent. You're not allowing somebody to say, I like poetry, therefore I'm going to post my poetry because that's an extension of who I am. Yeah. You're posting your poetry, and then the algorithm is not liking that, so people aren't seeing it. Yeah. And then your learned behavior is, nobody likes my poetry. Here, I'm gonna. Here's my selfie, and then that gets liked, and then that causes you to alter your behavior away from your authentic self, and that's what
Which really brings it back to the very beginning of the episode. It's like, is this to be more of ourselves or more part of the commerce of the system, or how do we integrate ourselves? David, geez, we already ran out of time.
It's been a great conversation.
I would love to have you back.
Thank you. I'd love to be back.
This was a really great conversation. You are the co-host of the podcast Funniest Tech.
Yes, I am.
Do you want to give it a shout out?
Sure.
Where we can find
Please go to funniesttech.com. We're also on iTunes, Google, and SoundCloud. And basically, I team up with the UCB comedian Joe Leonardo, and we bring on experts to tackle the thorniest issues in technology, like cryptocurrency and diversity in tech and augmented reality. And we have a lot of fun with it. So check us out.
Absolutely will. Thank you again so much for your time. Thanks for being here, and we'll have you back.
Terrific.
All the best.
Thank you.
Goodbye from Future Bites. We'll be back very soon with a new episode next week. Be well. Ciao.